My name doesn't matter yet. What matters is the box. 6 months ago, a woman I hadn't spoken to in 11 years mailed me a shipping box with no return address, and inside it, wrapped in a dish towel that still smelled like her kitchen, was a recipe binder I wrote myself when I was 9 years old. Pages warped from flour and butter. My handwriting getting steadier year by year like tree rings. And taped inside the front cover, a single index card in a hand that was not mine. Total owed to date, $31,460. Payable upon reconciliation. That's my mother's handwriting. And reconciliation is her word for the day I come home and start paying. I'm going to tell you how a girl who could make a wedding cake by 14 ended up owing her own mother for the flour. If you've ever built something with your 2 hands and watched someone else put their name on the receipt, stay with me, because I promise you the ending is worth the drive. And if this is the kind of story you need today, subscribe now, because you're going to want to be here for what she did with that box. I grew up above a bakery that wasn't technically a bakery. It was our kitchen in a rented duplex on Larkspur Street, and my mother, Renee, ran it out of the oven like a woman running a small country. She had real talent. I'll give her that honestly, because this story only makes sense if you understand she wasn't faking the skill, only the ownership of mine. I was 7 the first time she let me pipe a border. 8 when she started calling me her sous chef to customers. 9 when I made an entire dozen cupcakes alone, start to finish, while she sat at the table doing invoices, and she frosted them with her signature swirl and delivered them to the Hendrickson anniversary party as Renee's Kitchen Originals, and came home electric, thrilled, and told me I was a natural. I remember being so proud I couldn't eat dinner. I didn't understand yet that pride was the first ingredient in the recipe she was actually building. By 11, I wasn't helping. I was working. Saturdays meant 6 a.m. wake-ups to start proofing dough before school orders needed to go out. My mother kept a ledger, a real one, spiral-bound, columns for orders, ingredients, hours. She called it learning the business. And for a long time, I believed that's exactly what it was. A gift. Not everyone's mother teaches them a trade. Here's the sentence that changed the shape of my childhood, and she said it so casually I almost missed it. I was 12, icing a 3-tier order for a christening, and I asked if I could keep some of what we made that week for a school trip. My mother didn't look up from the ledger. Sweetheart, you're not an employee. You're an investment. Investments don't draw a salary. They draw down until they pay for themselves. I didn't know what that meant. I know exactly what it meant now. That was the year the second ledger started. Not the order book, a private one, kept in a marbled composition notebook she called the accounts, where every bag of flour, every stick of butter, every hour of oven electricity I used got logged against my name specifically, separate from hers, separate from the business. She framed it as fairness. If I was going to become a real pastry chef one day, I needed to understand that ingredients cost money. I needed to learn the business had 2 sides, costs and revenue. And I was, in her words, on the cost side until I proved otherwise. I want you to sit with the arithmetic of that for a second, because I had to sit with it for years. I was the one baking. She was the one selling. And in her accounting, I was the liability. By 14, I was doing full wedding cakes on my own. Real ones, 3 and 4 tiers, fondant work that customers specifically requested by asking for Renee's daughter's cakes, which my mother allowed people to say within earshot of me and then corrected the second they left. Renee's Kitchen, she'd say. One name on the sign. She wasn't wrong, technically. It was her business license. Her name on the awning. Her sister had helped her open it with a small loan back before I was born, and my mother had spent 15 years building the reputation. I understood, even at 14, that a business needs one name. What I didn't understand was why the book said I owed thousands of dollars for the privilege of building it with her. The accounts notebook by then had a running total. I saw it once, on the counter, and my stomach dropped the way it does when you step off a curb you didn't see. 4 years of ingredients, oven depreciation. She'd actually written oven depreciation next to my name, and something called training value, which she'd assigned a dollar figure to, as if the skill in my own hands was a loan she'd extended and could one day call in. I asked my father about it once. He worked nights at a distribution warehouse and mostly stayed out of the kitchen the way some men stay out of weather they don't understand. He looked at the notebook, looked at me, and said, "Your mother's careful with money. That's not a bad thing to learn." Then he went back to his newspaper. I want to tell you I resented him for that. Mostly I just understood the way kids understand things before they have words for them, that he'd decided a long time ago which battles were his to fight, and this wasn't one of them. So I did what capable kids do. I got good at the parts one could control. I got better at fondant roses than most adults twice my age. I entered a regional youth baking competition at 15 without telling my mother, used a school computer, borrowed the entry fee from a friend, told her I was at a study group, and I won second place in the state. There was a small write-up in the county paper. A photo of me holding a ribbon next to a cake I'd built alone in a kitchen I wasn't allowed to call mine. My mother framed the newspaper clipping. She hung it in the shop window. Underneath it, in her own hand on a little card, it said, "Renee's Kitchen is proud to have trained this rising star." Trained. Like I was livestock she'd raised well. If you've ever had someone take the one thing you built entirely yourself and put their name under it like a certificate of ownership, tell me in the comments, because I think more people carry that scar than we ever admit out loud. At 16, I asked to be paid. Not a fortune. Minimum wage, on the books, like any other worker in that kitchen who wasn't blood. My mother's answer is one I've replayed more times than I can count, because it was delivered so gently, like she was doing me a kindness. "You'll be paid," she said, "the day the accounts are settled. Right now, sweetheart, you're still in the red." In the red. 4 years of 6 a.m. Saturdays, wedding cakes with my name nowhere on them, a state ribbon hanging under someone else's sentence. And according to her arithmetic, I owed the house money. That was the year I started my own notebook, though I didn't call it accounts. I called it nothing. I just wrote down hours. Every Saturday, every holiday order, every 5 a.m. proof check before school, logged in a cheap spiral notepad I kept under my mattress like it was contraband, because in that house, proof of my own labor felt like something that needed hiding. I graduated high school and did the thing that I think surprised everyone except me. I didn't go to pastry school. I went to community college for business administration, nights and weekends, while working a real job. A diner 40 minutes away, where the tips were mine the day I earned them, and nobody logged my flour usage against a debt I never agreed to. My mother called it a betrayal of my gift. I called it the first time in 11 years I got to keep what I made. I want to be fair to her here, because fairness is the whole reason I'm telling you this story instead of just being angry at you through a camera. My mother was not a monster in every room. She hugged me when I won that ribbon before she ever hung the clipping up wrong. She taught me a skill that has fed me, literally, for the rest of my life. But somewhere in her own history, and I only learned this later, from my aunt at a funeral neither of us wanted to be at, somewhere in her own childhood, her mother had made her earn her keep in that same shop, on that same street, with a ledger of her own. My mother didn't invent this. She inherited it, the way some people inherit eye color, and she never once stopped to ask if it was something she wanted to pass down or just something she didn't know how to put away. That doesn't cancel the debt she tried to hand me. It just explains where the pen came from. I left for good at 19. Not dramatically. No slammed door, no scene. I just took a job 2 states over at a hotel bakery that paid real wages and gave me my own station, and I packed my spiral notebook of hours, and I left the marbled composition book of accounts exactly where it sat on the counter, because I had stopped agreeing to owe anything I never signed for. For the next 11 years, I built something that was entirely, unambiguously mine. I worked my way up from a hotel pastry station to head baker. Then, 4 years ago, I opened my own place. Small, 6 tables, a case of cakes and tarts, a hand-lettered sign out front with my actual name on it, first and last, because I had promised myself at 19 that if I ever had a shop, nobody's name would sit above mine on my own door. My mother and I spoke twice in those 11 years. Once at my grandmother's funeral, where she introduced me to a cousin as my daughter, she's in baking too, which is its own quiet theft if you think about it long enough. And once, when she called to ask if I'd consider coming back to help out for the holiday rush, as though 11 years and a ledger of debt could be undone with a Christmas apron. I said no both times. Politely. Firmly. And then, 6 months ago, the box arrived. Inside the box, my 9-year-old recipe binder and that index card. Total owed to date, $31,460. Payable upon reconciliation. There was a letter, too, folded twice, in the same hand. My mother's shop, Renee's Kitchen, was closing. Rent had tripled on Larkspur Street the way rent does in neighborhoods that get discovered 15 years too late for the people who built them. She was behind on the lease, behind on a small business loan she'd taken out 3 years back to replace equipment, and behind, as it turned out, on more than she'd admitted to my father in the years since he'd passed. She needed $40,000 in 6 weeks, or the shop, 30 years of her life, would close for good. And in her letter, she framed the debt she believed I owed her as the obvious solution. Not a loan, not a request, a reconciliation. As if I were finally being asked to pay off a mortgage I'd been avoiding, instead of being asked, for the second time in my life, to hand over money for a business that never once put my name on anything but the electric bill for the oven I used. I sat with that letter for 3 days. And I want to tell you honestly, there was a night in there where I opened my banking app and stared at the number, and some old, tired part of me, the part that still flinches at "you're in the red," genuinely considered wiring it. Not because I believed I owed it. Because some debts don't live in a ledger. They live in the part of you that's still 9 years old and just wants someone to say the cakes were good and mean it without a receipt attached. I didn't wire it. Here's what I did instead. I spent that week doing what I've learned to do best. Not out of coldness, but because it's the only kind of help I actually trust. I am, as it turns out, decent with a spreadsheet now. Decent with the kind of paperwork nobody teaches you in a home kitchen. So I built her a folder. Not a check. A folder. Inside it, a full application to the Small Business Hardship Relief Program our state runs for legacy retail tenants. Renee's Kitchen qualified on every line, 30 years in the same location. A referral to a local nonprofit that does free debt mediation specifically for small food businesses, with the contact already emailed and a Tuesday appointment already booked. A letter template for the landlord requesting a structured repayment plan, citing the exact statute that protects long-term commercial tenants from mid-lease rent hikes without notice, because I'd checked, and hers qualified. And on top of all of it, printed clean, no note, no explanation needed. The original newspaper clipping from that regional competition, the one she'd framed under her own sentence all those years ago. I'd found a copy in an archive and had it reprinted without the little card underneath. Then I drove 3 hours to Larkspur Street for the first time in 11 years. She met me at the door of the shop, apron still on out of habit, though there was nothing left to bake, and I watched her eyes go straight to my hands, checking, I think, for a checkbook. When she saw the folder instead, something in her face did something I'd never seen it do. It didn't harden. It just got very tired, all at once, like a woman finally setting down something she'd been carrying since before I was born. "This isn't the money," she said. "No," I said. "It's better than the money. The money runs out. This doesn't." She opened the folder at the counter, the same counter where the accounts notebook used to sit, and read every page slowly, the way she used to read invoices, except this time nobody was on the cost side. When she got to the clipping, she went quiet for a long time. "I hung that under the wrong sentence," she finally said. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was the closest she'd ever come, and I'd learned enough in 11 years to know that some people's apologies arrive in the shape of an admission instead of the word itself, and you take what's true over what's tidy. I told her the truth back, the same way I'd tell any client the truth. "I'm not paying the account you kept, Mom. I never agreed to it, and I'm not going to start now just because it's finally due, but I'll help you fight for the shop, because the shop isn't the debt. You just taught me by accident to never let the two get confused again." She took the folder. She kept the appointment. 6 weeks later, the landlord accepted the payment plan. The hardship relief came through for 2/3 of what she needed, and Renee's kitchen is still standing on Larkspur Street, under her name, exactly as it should be. The marbled composition book, the accounts. I never asked what happened to it. I don't need to know. Some ledgers you don't have to burn. You just have to stop being the only one still making payments on them. My father's been gone 3 years now, but I kept one thing of his, the folded newspaper clipping, the original, the one that hung under her sentence for over a decade. It's in a frame in my own shop now, in the back office where only I see it, and underneath it, in my own hand, I wrote the caption that should have been there the first time. Built this herself. No training value assessed. If someone in your life ever tried to put a price tag on something that was only ever yours to give, hear me say this plainly. Talent is not a loan. Labor is not a debt you owe the person who taught you to use it. And you are allowed to help the people who hurt you without ever agreeing that you owed them in the first place. Those are 2 different accounts. Don't let anyone hand you one bill for both. That's the story. A ledger, a folder, a clipping, finally hung under the right sentence. If this one hit close to home, you already know what to do. Like it, subscribe, and tell me below, what's the thing you built that someone else tried to put their name on? I read every comment, and I promise you, you're not the only one who's ever had to buy back their own recipe.